Hey, everybody. Welcome to Daniel Davis Deep Dive. We're coming to you live from Washington, D.C., and we've got a really interesting show for you today. We have back on our show Matt VanDyke, who is the founder of the Sons of Liberty International. Has spent a lot of time in Ukraine and has actually just returned, and we're very grateful, Matt, to have you back on the show. And I know especially because of some of your recent activity there. You've actually been on some of the front lines, and we're very grateful that you're okay, that everything is fine, and look forward to hearing from you some of your experiences here. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So let's just jump right into it because there's a lot of things going on, really in Washington and Kiev and Brussels and on the front line, and all of this stuff kind of works together. And we hear a lot about what happens in Washington, especially with what President Biden's saying, what the Congress is doing or not doing. A lot of the debate here, and certainly when we get to what Zelensky and Zelensky has been going on several press conferences of late, which is a little bit surprising given his previous predilections. But what we don't hear anything about is what's happening at the front. And so we want to get some of your firsthand perspective about what the fighting is actually like. And I know for operational security reasons, we don't even want to mention anything about specifically where you were, other than somewhere in the Eastern Front on the front line fighting. And I wonder if you could just kind of give us, first of all, just kind of a flavor of what life has been like for you, because I know it's that was kind of different than what you had done the last time we talked to you.
Right. Well, my unit had our first combat mission. It was unlike anything else I've experienced in any previous war, and primarily because of drones. From the very start, we were actually hunted by drones that would come one after another once they found our position. So we were caught out in the woods, drones dropping grenades on us, several grenades. It was a completely new experience being hunted by the air, and not really any way to respond to it other than hope that you can get out of the way before a grenade drops. The artillery is unbelievable. Probably on average every 10 seconds or so around.
Oh gosh.
Pretty much constant sound. We were attacked by Russian aircraft. But really, it's the drones. The drones combined with trench warfare is something that is going to change warfare forever.
And what has been the at least in the unit that you were in? Have you been just completely in a defensive position to try to hold what you have, or has there been any back and forth, local counterattacks? How is the fighting physically conducted in your unit?
All defensive in my unit. And most of winter will be like that on both sides. The conditions are already bad enough. The drone warfare has made it very difficult to leave a trench dugout on either side of the war. The Russians have largely caught up to us and maybe surpassed us in some ways with drone warfare. So really, I mean, you hear the noise. It sounds like a mosquito in your ear, and that's a drone coming. So at least you can hear them most of the time. But and these are mostly little commercially available drones, quadcopters that people use for photography, and they're being used to drop grenades. And we do it, Russians do it, but it certainly has changed war. I mean, there's no real way to advance when you can't step out of the dugout even to take a leak without risk of dying from a grenade coming from the sky.
Man, that's yeah. I mean, I've had 4 combat tours myself, none of which had anything to do with drones, and didn't have to worry about that part at all. So I can only imagine how much more anxiety and stress that adds to the already high combat stress that you have anytime you're under fire there. I'm just curious, and if I ask you anything that's operational security, just feel free not to answer, because I don't want to put anything at risk here. But especially as you mentioned there, you can hear it in your ear, and it's ever present or so. Do you see them, especially if those FPV drones, not the ones that drop the grenades, but the ones that actually are FPV, like Gary was just showing a second ago? Do you hear that in time to be able to take any countermeasures?
We didn't experience FPV drones. They were just dropping grenades on us, and those drones were flying low enough that, you could definitely see them very clearly. Um, I quickly learned to notice patterns, things I won't get into, except ways that I had an idea of when something was coming. But those you can definitely see. We could watch them watching us and try to get out of the way before we figured they would drop a grenade. Um, it's hard to shoot one out of the sky when it could move a second in the range. So we didn't try that, but that's how low they were, 50, 100 meters. So
Okay.
yeah, it was. You can definitely watch them, which makes it all the worse, actually.
Wow. Now I know from my own experience that sometimes just sitting and waiting is like the worst thing, and all we ever wanted to do was just go and attack and get out of our positions and move forward and try to take on the enemy. And just sitting in the attack positions or wherever we were at was just maddening because you can't do anything. Do you have was there any sense of of just frustration, whether from you or from some of your compatriots there, the Ukrainian fighters, that it's just so difficult to just sit in a trench and try to avoid getting hit with a drone or a missile strike or anything else without ever seeing the enemy? Or does the Russians, do you sometimes have direct engagements with infantry fighters?
There are direct engagements. I had some direct engagements. I won't get into that, but there's certainly direct engagements. The distance between the trench line and the no man's land is not that much. It could be a few hundred meters. It could be 50 meters, depending on the location.
Wow.
But as far as frustrations, sitting in dugouts in the trench, really everybody's trying to make it through their deployment alive at this point because of the drone threat. You can't sit too still, though, because then the mice start crawling on you. And when you're asleep, the mice crawl on you. I had one of my...
We're looking at some pictures here of that you provided from your time down in those dugouts.
Yeah, those are two of the mice. They have no fear. They come out daylight, night, right in front of you, crawling on your body as if you're not there. Fortunately, they're not trench World War I. They're just mice. But it certainly just adds to the whole surreal environment of this war.
Wow. So I'm going to ask you a question or two about what some of the Ukrainian soldiers are feeling about the course of the war itself. But before we do that, I want to kind of set up what things have been said publicly here and to see to what extent they're even aware of these things at the front line. So first of all, I want to see Zelensky, I believe it was just yesterday or maybe the day before, talking about that he's grateful to the American support, but that he says that they have everything they need. Here's what he said.
Окремо я хочу подякувати за новий оборонний пакет від Сполучених Штатів, вже 34-й за цей рік і 54-й за час нашого захисту від цієї російської агресії. В цьому пакеті ракети для систем ППО і для хаймарсів, артилерія калібр 155-105, додаткова бронетехніка. Все те, що потрібно. Все, що відчутно допомагає. Я вдячний президенту Байдену, Конгресу, обом партіям та усім тим, хто підтримує нас у цілком конкретному завданні. Російський терор повинен програти. Терор завжди повинен програвати.
So he reiterates that the objectives remain the same. Russia has to lose. We have to prevail. We have to keep going. So that's his message overall. And he's thanking the president. And then he says, we have all we need here. But then specifically when he mentions the Congress, there are some problems over there. And Chuck Schumer actually said this.
We have to send more aid to Ukraine to defeat Putin. We know how. This is a historic moment, as I have said. History will look back if we don't support our ally in Ukraine and regard it as a major negative turning point for the U.S. and the Western world.
But of course, as we know, that funding has not been released. And even though there's lots of there's issues in the U.S. with border security that they're saying, the Republicans especially are saying, until we get this, we won't get that. The Democrats are saying, yeah, it's important that we fund Ukraine, but we're not going to sacrifice our views on what the border should be. And so as a result, there's no money given over. And it's unclear, even after they reconvene here next week, whether that's going to be coming loose or not. And so I just want to stop at that point for a minute and ask, to what extent do any of the troops on the ground, are they aware of these problems especially within Congress? And what do they feel about the fact that no money has been given so far?
They hear things reported in the news, but it's not at the top of their concerns. It's all these deployments for these soldiers are incredibly difficult. Furthermore, the average age of Ukrainian recruits, I think, right now is about 43. So, a lot of these guys are trying to survive through their deployment and through the winter. They're following the politics. I think everybody's confident that America won't give up this fight. Enough people know that it's a domestic political issue that needs to be sorted out. But with Europe and America so heavily invested in a conflict that we absolutely cannot use, we already see the ramifications of what Putin's done with China being more aggressive with Taiwan, Venezuela threatening Guyana. That will just spread if Putin is allowed to take hold and keep territory that he took by force in a war of conquest. So
Now, yeah. Sorry. So Zelensky also said in a separate interview, not just is he looking to get stuff from the West, but he's actually looking to start making things on the ground there in Ukraine. Here's what he had to say on that.
Ukraine's defense industry is not just recovering, it is becoming as productive as it needs to be for a modern, technology-driven warfare. For the next year, we have set ourselves crystal clear goals in terms of artillery, drones, missiles, and armored vehicles. One of our major political results this year is an agreement with our partners, particularly the United States, on co-production of weapons.
But the problem is those things take time, like a lot of time when you're talking about building in, infrastructure and expanding military capacity to be able to build those kinds of things. So that's going to take some time. But right now, time is not a big luxury that Ukraine has because, as we see, and I believe it's this CNN interview, there have been some recent tactical setbacks for Ukraine.
Russia's most recent claimed battlefield victory driving Ukrainian forces to the outskirts of Marinka on the Eastern Front. The prize, though, dust and rubble, as the vicious fighting has turned the town into a wasteland. Still, Russia's defense minister claiming this is significant progress for Moscow. The Russian army is constantly taking more favorable positions and expanding controlled territories in all directions, he said. We are consistently moving forward, achieving the stated goals of the special operation. Russia says its forces are now pressing in the entire east, looking to encircle the Ukrainians in Avdiivka, increasingly laying waste to that city as well, Ukrainian authorities still operating their show.
Now, potentially compounding the fact that the American Congress is debating whether they even are going to make any new funding requirements and to what extent that they do when they are able to finally, is also this report from Politico just yesterday that now actually the administration might be thinking that ultimate victory is not going to be in the cards.
In a jarring reversal of U.S. foreign policy, the Biden administration seems to openly acknowledge that the war in Ukraine will end with diplomacy and lost territory from Ukraine, and not through total Ukrainian victory. The White House gave the updated policy aim to Politico and argued this had been America's position throughout the conflict. However, as friend of the show Zed Jelani posted on X, arguing Ukraine would have to give up land is something which, if you said it 6 months ago, made you Putin's right-hand man.
So when you're talking about the guys who are fighting at the front and just trying to survive and live another day and so that more help can come, how does it impact them if they hear, and then maybe they haven't because this is so new, that now the president of the United States is saying, maybe we do have to just say, let's settle for the land you've lost already so you don't lose any more and have some kind of negotiated settlement. Is there an appetite for fighting for a settlement versus fighting for an eventual victory? How does all that work out?
It's certainly not helpful to morale, but at this point, Ukrainians are still aiming to liberate the entire country. Another thing the Ukrainians recognize that perhaps the West doesn't is that there can't really be any peace with Russia because Russia will just come back in a few years. Russia right now is at least on its heels and hurting, but if you allow Russia to rebuild, Russia will do this exact same thing again. And I don't really see a solution to that. I don't even know if Ukraine getting fast-tracked to NATO membership, which would still not be a guarantee to happen because there's NATO members who could block that. I don't even know if that would be a guarantee against Russia attempting something at this point. Russia seems to know what our limits are, and we seem to have figured out what Russia's limits are. And Putin still doesn't respect many boundaries, treaties, agreements. So really, there can be no peace. Ukraine's sort of in an impossible situation unless they soundly defeat Russia and are able to defend themselves in the future.
And so this summer offensive obviously did not go as well as anybody in the West or Ukraine would have hoped. They barely took, a little bit of the area, in some of the Zaporizhia area. They have a foothold now over the river there in Kherson City or near Kherson City, but they haven't been able to go any further. And so the question is, if they were not able to succeed after whatever it was, about 6 months of complete prep and now 6 months of execution, do the troops ever think much beyond what is the point of continuing to struggle here if we can't actually take back the land? Or do they think that somehow in enough time, whether it's in a year or two from now, then maybe they can get the capacity later? What's the thinking process, or is it just to survive today?
I haven't heard talk of that among anybody. Really, there's hope that mistakes that happened during this attempted counteroffensive can be corrected. There's hope that F-16s will make a difference. But I know that Ukraine definitely has to start doing some things differently in the next attempt at a counteroffensive than they did this time for certain. No new military technology or hardware is going to make up for the deficit that we experienced in our capability. The Russians are very well entrenched. They have part of the problem is they stack their landmines stack them in threes to destroy mine clearing equipment. So Ukrainians came in ready with the equipment to clear mines and move and execute the combined arms warfare that they learned from U.S. training in Germany. And then their mine clearing equipment got destroyed on the first mine they hit. And then they got eaten up by artillery. So, things need to change. There have to be some new thought in how to wage this war. The drone situation needs to be figured out. There's a lot of things that need to be done before Ukraine could start retaking territory. Otherwise, this conflict could drag on for years.
Yeah, one of our viewers there just popped up a question. Just ironically, I was literally just about to ask there. Is Zelensky and Zelensky have both previously said, just the last few days, that they're going to launch a new mobilization drive of somewhere between 400 and 500,000 troops. And what is the expectation that those new level of troops can change any dynamics on the battlefield? And if you're saying that the average age of the Ukraine's already at 43, do you think this will lower it? Will they get more younger people? And do you think that that'll make a difference on the battlefield with more people?
I believe the new mobilization will change some of the requirements and exemptions for mobilization. So there will be younger people mobilized. Ukraine still has a very large population, many more people that could be mobilized. The mobilized troops are of obviously a varying quality, draftees versus enlistees. So it's throwing more men at the problem without changing some tactics and some innovative thinking here might not have the desired effect. I get a little bit concerned when I look at Ukraine mobilizing hundreds of thousands more, Russia doing the same, and both of them have declared, at least Ukraine's declared the strategy of attrition warfare. Russia always fights attrition warfare. But two sides with a strategy of attrition warfare and recruiting more bodies, this is a recipe for mass casualties and probably not much territorial change.
And you've mentioned a couple of times now that without some changes that a different outcome's not going to have. Do you have any sense for what those changes need to be? What could Ukraine do to change the outcome on the battlefield?
It's some things actually my organization's working on. We're working on some technology that we're going to present to the Ukrainian military, but these are going to probably make incremental differences to some units. As far as a mass change in strategy, I don't know. I really don't know at this point. There hasn't been a war like this with the level of drone warfare where you can't even step outside of a trench for a second without risk of death. It's very hard to advance and take land in those circumstances. On top of the artillery, the landmines, everything else. It's a very different kind of war. It's a kind of war that makes territorial gains very difficult, and
Yeah.
especially when you're using a lot of draftees and then expecting them to get out of the trench, out of the dugout, with drones buzzing overhead. It's a tough ask.
Yeah, I can unfortunately only imagine that. It appears to me from a distance and from looking at videos and stuff that I've seen and comparing my own personal experience in armored units, as well as studying like World War I and World War II, that there are some significant changes into how things are done because of the drone warfare is the primarily one, not just the FPV drones or the dropping grenade drones or the intelligence drones, et cetera, all those things combined. But that there is still a need for armored vehicles. There's still a need for tanks, definitely still a need for artillery. You've got the ballistic missiles involved there. And so you can't do without these things. It's not like drones have replaced those, because if you don't have armored vehicles, you can't even hardly get up to the trenches, if I'm understanding correctly. And I wonder, how that appears to you from the ground. Do you think that any of the things that we've done before, like in Desert Storm or World War II, even are superfluous and no longer valid, or is it just changing the components and the way things fit together?
It's all valid and it's all needed. I mean, armored vehicles are needed because, as you said, I mean, a grenade dropped from a drone will take out a soft-skinned vehicle. So you need the armored vehicle, but at the same time, drones are dropping grenades that are tank killers. So, I mean, the use of artillery obviously is never going away. It's been used to a tremendous amount in this war, probably more than anything else. You need combined arms warfare. Now it includes drones. Now it includes drones that cost $300 and grenades that are made, in a garage by both sides. It's change warfare. It's all the elements put together. But people will be studying this war in the Pentagon for years.
Yeah.
Because this is what will be faced from now on in every conflict. Until there's a way to neutralize the drone threat completely and take that off the table somehow, it's going to be very hard to fight any conflict, because even any insurgent group, anybody can afford a $300 drone.
Yeah.
The kamikaze drones are only a few $100s. So with that kind of threat, I mean, if the U.S. had faced this in Iraq and Afghanistan, we would have had far higher casualties than we did. I mean, this is
I'm sure you're right.
a nightmare now for any nation wanting to go to war.
And do you think, and I'm maybe asking you to put on your predictive hat here, because it may not be answerable right now, but is there a point, or would there be a point to where the Ukrainian side just says, we want to drive Russia out, and everybody understands that 100%, no questions at all, because they were invaded. The Russians attacked, they invaded the country, they're destroying Ukrainian cities and all that. But at some point, is it possible, especially until they find some way to neutralize both the drones and the mines, without both of those things being taken care of? I don't know how they could drive Russia out. And of course, they're planting more mines. The Ukraine side is apparently doing the same, especially up in the northern part, to guard against a potential Russian invasion, or a re-invasion rather, in that part of there. So that would seem to preclude any big changes in territory as well. But is there a point, do you think, to where the mentality of the fighters could get to the point to say, well, what's the point? We just need to make any kind of thing to stop the fighting. Even if there may be a war in the future, we got to stop the fighting now, or we're all just going to die and not accomplish anything. Do you think that that's anywhere in the possibility? And is there any way to avoid that if it does?
It's a possibility in the future. I mean, that's a decision for Ukraine to make. It's a democracy. The public will exert political pressure if they come to that point. But both Ukraine and Russia historically have a high tolerance for pain, have a high tolerance for casualties. That's just how warfare is done in Eastern Europe. That's how it's always been done in Eastern Europe. They have not reached the threshold of where they're ready to give up the fight and accept the loss of land. And part of also what you run into is that the more lives you've lost, the more invested you are, and then the more you feel the need to see it through and have the sacrifices be for something. It ends up being a spiral that is going to have a good result or bad result or no result. But Ukrainian public is not at the point yet where they're ready to throw in the towel or make concessions.
I see. So unfortunately, that just means that the war, I guess, continues on. And it's just so hard to watch from this side. I can only imagine from the front lines there, because we want peace to come back to Ukraine, for the killing to stop, for the destruction to stop, and we're just not sure where this is going. But God be with you, and then so grateful for what you're doing there, to do whatever you can to help. Both training and helping the people on the front lines, and even helping the country potentially find new technology. So we admire you for that. We respect you so much, and we're so grateful for you carving out some time to come here. I know you're really busy right now, and we thank you so much for coming on today, Matt.
Thank you for having me. Always nice to talk to you.
Thanks, and we certainly wish you continued well, and we pray for your safety every day. We do.
Thank you.
All right, and that is all we have for you today on Deep Dive. We are going to continue to bring you all the news you need, all the things that you're not seeing anywhere else, and stuff like this with Mr. VanDyke here is just something you're not going to get anywhere else. And so like and subscribe to this, and share this with your other friends so that they can also get the same kind of information you have. And we will look forward to seeing you next time on Deep Dive.